The MCAT Podcast, session number 86. A collaboration between the medical school headquarters and Next Step Test Prep. The MCAT Podcast is here to make sure you have the information you need to succeed on your MCAT test day. We all know that the MCAT is one of the biggest hurdles you'll face as a pre-med, and we're here to give you the motivation and information that you need to know to help you get the score you deserve so you can one day call yourself a medical student. Welcome to the MCAT Podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week. I have many other podcasts, which you can find at mededmedia.com. Again, that's MEDED media.com. This week, we're continuing our Psych Soch series. If you're just tuning into us for the first time this week, back in session 84 and 85, we've done Psych Soch questions. So this week, we're continuing that again, and next week, we'll do our final week 4 of Psych Soch. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, Brian, back for some more psychology questions. We've done it the last 2 weeks. This is week 3, and we'll do another week next week. They seem to be getting easier and harder depending on which ones we're doing. For me specifically, and so I'm going to pretend I'm the normal pre-med, where I've done biology and chemistry, and I can kind of reason through some of these anatomy ones. And then when it comes to like true hardcore psych questions, it's like I always trip up on the strict definitions of things. What's your recommendation for a student to help them get through all of these definitions of different psych terms?
So there's a couple of different things, right? And like you said, that you can't, I think we saw this, what was it, last week or the week before, Ryan, where you were trying to reason through based on the kind of like conversational English definition of the words. And that will get you part of the way there, but they really do want to be technical, right? In the same way that a Bronsted Lowry acid and an Arrhenius acid are different things, and they have really strict definitions. In the same way in the psych, those terms are every bit as strict, every bit as kind of tightly defined. So part of it is repetition, right? Don't take it for granted. Students will often think that the psych is easier because it's kind of squishy and there's no math or whatever. But you really do have to give it the respect that it's due and give it the time to memorize all those things. And then second, one of the things we say all the time about memorizing stuff that's difficult or weird or abstract is give it some context. Try and connect it to people you know, your own memories, experiences in your life. Build mnemonics that are kind of mentally sticky. They've got emotional content. They're outrageous. Use any number of techniques to make sure that you're really thoroughly memorizing the content rather than just a kind of passing familiarity.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, kind of like the profession we're heading into, right?
Darn it. I was looking for the easy answer. All right. So this is episode 86, so you can get the handouts at the mcatpodcast.com/86. Before we dive into our 3 questions today, Brian, any specific knowledge or information that you want to impart on us for the types of questions we pulled for today?
Yeah, so last time we have been doing some kind of typical psychology. We're going to continue that today, do a couple of psychology questions, and then start to transition into sociology, which is just sort of the psychology of the big, right? Psychology of whole big groups or nations or so on. And then next week we'll wrap up our psych social science series with an entire round of sociology questions.
Okay, sounds good. So question 3, according to the model articulated by Erikson, which example demonstrates an individual in the industry versus inferiority stage of development? A 30-year-old male gets married and struggles to align his goals with his partner's. B, a 50-year-old female dedicates her life to a nonprofit organization in an effort to feel like a contributing member of society. C, a happy, healthy 8-year-old male leads his soccer team in goals scored and excels in mathematics class. Or D, a 16-year-old female feels awkward in her body and questions her sexual identity. Industry versus inferiority stage of development. So I would obviously have to know Erikson, a couple weeks ago or last week, we had to know Piaget, and now we need to know Erik Erikson. So another thing we need to know. And obviously, I don't remember anything from Erik Erikson, so I'll let you take over.
Okay, so Erikson, psychosocial development, just like Piaget that we were looking at last week with stages of cognitive development, Erikson likes to split the human life cycle down based on social relationships. And so if we look at these answer choices, a 30-year-old, the social crisis that you're resolving at that point is intimacy versus isolation. The question, of course, asked us about industry versus inferiority, so that doesn't apply. The next one says a 50-year-old female, right? And so that's what Erikson would call adulthood or later adulthood, from 40 to 64, roughly. So 50-year-olds are resolving the crisis of generativity versus stagnation. Right, so that's the crisis one resolves at that point in one's life. Answer choice C is an 8-year-old. Okay, so school age, 8 years old. That's the industry versus inferiority crisis that one is resolving in one's relationship with one's friends and schoolmates. And so that's the right answer there. Industry versus inferiority is an 8-year-old. The last answer choice is 16, right? So 16 years old, of course, adolescence. The crisis there, identity versus role confusion, where the person is resolving that by looking to peers and looking to find role models and figuring out who they are.
Okay, so it's just another good example, a good question showing there are these lists of things and lists of definitions and stages and lots of things that you need to know.
Absolutely.
Why don't they just give you this like a periodic table, right? They give you the periodic table. Why don't they just give you a list of all of these different models too?
There you go. Periodic table of human development.
Yes.
That'd be nice.
That'd be awesome. All right.
Let's take a look at the next one. Question number 4. Which of these situations involves a person whose view of morality falls within the conventional stage of Kohlberg's stages of moral development? Okay, so now again, we've seen Piaget, we've seen Erikson, now we got Kohlberg, and we need to know what's the conventional stage of moral reasoning. So a teenager refuses to join his friends painting graffiti on a public building because he's afraid he'll get caught. B, a college student believes every woman should have the right to an abortion because she thinks that control over one's body is a fundamental human right. C, a young man never speeds when driving his car because he thinks that people should abide by the rule of law, and that if everyone drove too fast, the roads would not be safe. And then finally, D, a man participates in a gay pride parade even though he does not identify as gay because he believes that everyone has the right to express and be themselves. So conventional moral development.
Yeah, it's all you.
Yeah, so Kohlberg's whole idea was that you can pose people moral questions, moral quandaries, and there was a kind of classic one that he used about somebody who needed to save his wife's life but didn't have money to buy the medicine. So is it okay for him to steal the medicine, or does he have to let his wife die? And what Kohlberg did was he actually didn't care what the answer was, right? He didn't care if you said, no, it's never okay to steal, or if you said, yes, of course you have to steal to save the wife's life. What Kohlberg was interested in was why and how you reasoned your way to that answer. So, for example, if we look at these answer choices, A, a teenager refuses to join his friends painting graffiti. So that's the choice. But more importantly, why? Because he's afraid of getting caught. So his moral reasoning isn't about, right and wrong. It's just about fear of getting caught. And Kohlberg called that pre-conventional. So the kind of most basic level of moral reasoning was, what can I do to avoid getting caught? Or what can I do to get a reward? And Kohlberg considered that the most basic childlike moral reasoning, was that you make your moral decisions based on what will either avoid punishment or get you reward. So that's pre-conventional. On the other end of the scale, if we look at answer choice B, a college student believes every woman should have a right because she thinks that control over your body is a fundamental human right. So that's universal, right? Reasoning at the level of universal rights. that X, Y, and Z is moral or is not moral because of an overall universal abstract human right. And we see the same thing in answer choice D. A man participates in a pride parade even though he doesn't identify as gay because he believes that everyone has the right to blah, blah, blah. And so that's what Kohlberg would have called post-conventional reasoning. And that's the highest or most advanced stage of moral reasoning, where you don't care about social convention anymore. You're not just looking at your peers. You're not worried about being punished or rewarded. You're thinking on an abstract level of universal ideal human behavior. So answer choice A was pre-conventional, right? Just concerned with reward and punishment. Answer choices B and D were post-conventional, right? You're not looking to your neighbor for what's right. You just believe in universal abstract rights. Conventional, the correct answer to this question is answer choice C, where it's just about kind of getting along with your peers or society. So a young man never speeds while driving because he thinks you should obey the rule of law. So that person is not concerned about abstract universal rights, is not even saying that you should do this because you might get punished, right? That's more like a child, avoid punishment. No, this person thinks it's the right thing to do to obey the law. And so his moral reasoning is just based on the conventions of the society he lives in. In my society, the law says X, and so that's what's morally correct to do. Even if the law says that, certain minorities have to sit at the back of the bus, well, that's the law. And what's morally correct is obeying the law. That's classic conventional moral reasoning.
Okay. Very interesting. I liked where you were going to begin with not necessarily what the answer is, but why and how you got there. When I help students with their interview prep, that's what I talk about a lot is you can't be afraid of having a different point of view than the person interviewing you. They're more interested in your thought process for why you're saying what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope, right?
Yeah.
That they have the ability to kind of abstract their own opinion and just listen to the reasoning of the person there, of their interlocutor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Yeah. You want to read us this last one here? Question number 1?
Yeah. So question 1, again, handout, the MCATpodcast.com/86. Question 1 says, which of these descriptions accurately characterize stage 1 of the demographic transition model? Roman numeral 1, the fertility rate is higher than would be expected for the same population in stage 3. Roman numeral 2, the overall population is shrinking due to the high mortality rate. Roman numeral 3, education for children is typically mandatory. And Roman numeral 4, the population size tends to fluctuate moderately due to disease and catastrophe. So demographic transition model. So now we need to know big scale models, not just individual psychology models. So demographic transition and stage 1. So stage 1 tells me things are, if I were to take a guess here and use my brain to reason through things, stage 1 tells me we're early on. And so I would have to think that 3 wouldn't be included for education for children is typically mandatory. I would assume that comes later on with transition. Population size tends to fluctuate moderately due to disease and catastrophe. I would assume that would be part of stage 1 if we're... I'm picturing stage 1 as kind of like a third world country, and further on is us. So I would think 4 would be one of them. Roman numeral 4. Fertility rate is higher than would be expected for the same population. That would be true as well. So 1 and 4 are true. So we look at the answers. A is 1 only. B is 1 and 4 only. C is 1, 2, and 4 only, and D is all of them. So I'm going to say it's not D because I scratched out 3 already. Overall population is shrinking due to high mortality rate. I would say that that's not true because fertility rate is going to be higher. So I would go B, 1 and 4 only.
And that was perfect reasoning. Absolutely right. So the demographic transition model is how you transition from, like you said, a kind of third world rural country into the kind of fully developed industrialized nation. So in stage one, fertility rates are very high, so are mortality rates. So you make a lot of babies, but a lot of people die. That does tend to mean the population fluctuates, right? So if illness comes through, sweeps through the nation, a whole bunch of people die, but everyone's having lots of babies, so the population tends to bounce back. Stage two, so the first thing that happens is the mortality rate goes down, right? Because medicine gets better. You start taking care of babies better, so mortality rate drops. And then stage three, then the fertility rate starts to drop as well. And that stage three is where you start getting things like educating children. And we know that very clearly there's a link between the more educated the women are in a country, the lower the fertility rate is. And then finally in stage four is the final stage where both fertility and mortality are really low. Right, so if a baby gets born, there's a pretty good chance that baby's going to make it all the way to old age. Mm-hmm. And so in this case, absolutely right. Stage one is characterized by Roman numeral 1, fertility rate is high, and Roman numeral 4, there tends to be more fluctuation in the population size.
And so the number 2 would be the one possibly that would throw some people off with the high mortality rate, which is true, but the overall population isn't shrinking because of it.
Right, because exactly what your reasoning said, right? When you were talking it through, you said, oh, well, but the fertility rate is really high, so that offsets it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. That was a good one.
Excellent. Yep.
All right, there you have it. Some more Psych Soc for you. One of the harder content pieces for students who haven't taken Psych Soc. So one of the harder parts of the MCAT if you haven't taken Psych Soc. Hopefully this was helpful for you. There's a lot of memorization for the MCAT for Psych Soc. So make sure you're going out there, you're looking at the content, you're creating flashcards, or you're doing whatever you need to do based on your study habits to succeed on the MCAT for Psych Soc. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time for week 4, our final installment of our Psych Soc series.